Welcome to Lunch Table, Southern Company's unscripted dialogue series discussing today's important cultural matters. Hosted by Executive Vice President and President of External Affairs, Chris Womack. In Episode 2, Chris continues his conversation with leaders from across the system to discuss our culture, diversity and inclusion, Black History Month, and more. And now, Chris Womack.
Hey guys, welcome. Glad to see you. Glad to be here, having lunch with you.
Good to be
here. We're getting ready for Black History Month, and one of the things we thought about doing was getting some people together and talk about Black History Month, what it means, and the relevance of it. And so it was good to be in Birmingham, to be back at Alabama Power Company to have this conversation. And so to get started, be curious to hear you guys' thoughts about Black History Month. This country officially began to recognize Black History Month in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we started.
Great Omega Man, right?
Yeah. actually, we started in 1926 with Negro History Week.
Yeah.
So there's been a long period of kind of reflection and giving attention to the history of African Americans and in this country. And so, what do you guys mean? What has it meant to you as you've grown up and you see it come around in February and the things that we do and talk about and people we lift up? What does it mean? What does Black History Month mean to you guys?
Growing up, we'd always take a day and kind of analyze some prominent figure, whether Carter G. Woodson or George Washington Carver. But then on that last day, they'd put your picture up there and you talk about what history you wanted to have and how you'd pay for the legacy.
This is at your school?
At our church, really.
At a church.
But I was like JP. I went to a school where I was the only Black in the class.
Yeah.
A lot of times growing up. So it was important for us to really kind of focus on and kind of get that sense of home through that process. So that's always stuck with me, and we do that with our kids today.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's cool.
And I'll just jump in, and K-Rob was talking about, I was the only Black kid. It was this one picture I shared at a business forum where I went to kindergarten in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was the only Black kid in kindergarten. But when we moved back to Alabama, the first time I was a minority was when I came to work for Alabama Power.
Wow.
Because all the schools I attended were predominantly African American, of course, going to HBCU. But so I've always grown up with Black history being not only in February, but every day in those schools that I attended. And so for me, Black History Month is definitely special from a national perspective, but based on my experiences, it's something that we were taught every day.
I'm born and raised in Birmingham. And I think for me, Black history was a little bit different. Our family dynamic is a little bit different. My mother is Asian. My father is Black. And after, being in the military and touring all over, he decided to come home. Mm-hmm. And they had me. And it was interesting because we were met with a lot of adversity.
You guys need to eat up now, man.
Yeah.
We're at the
That's the pickle smells. It's so good. Yeah. So I have to say, I kind of got a hard and fast lesson in, discrimination where Black history was concerned, both within my family and just outside.
Yeah.
And, I had this father figure who grew up in Shorter, Alabama.
Tuskegee.
All of my family was in Tuskegee, at least on the Jeter side. And for him to try to, work to raise, these biracial children in the middle of civil rights unrest, it was a challenge, but it was the basic things about caring for humans and understanding that education about differences is the most important thing. And that really was kind of our history. Unfortunately, my father didn't get a chance to kind of ingrain some of the things that you learn in school because we were living it, everything from threats to, all of those types of things. And, it was always teaching compassion, teaching education, teaching difference and accepting that. So in the middle of racial, kind of unrest, it's different now. It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
So obviously we have a very rich history that played out in front of the world as it relates to Black history in Birmingham. And so growing up in school and church,
of course, we learned all of those things, and I've always appreciated Black history, but I appreciate it more so now as an adult, approaching 40. I'm 39, just turned 39 this month, and I feel like there's a certain level of self-awareness that you gain as you approach this age, this milestone, a certain level of being purposeful and intentional, and so that has translated to my yearning for learning more. I think I got a lot of the foundational things about more of the famous African Americans that JP referenced, and the leaders that we all kind of know about and celebrate. But at this stage, especially having a young son who's 7, so having a young family, and also, like I said, kind of getting more of a sense of self as I mature and grow in wisdom, I'm more intrigued and more intentional about grasping as much history as I can, knowledge of history, studying my history more purposefully.
But does it, I mean, being in Birmingham, because Birmingham was at the center of so many struggles and so much of the civil rights movement, is it good or bad? I mean, because I think, I lived in Birmingham for 10 plus years. Race is kind of a continuous conversation and project that we work on in Birmingham. I mean, it's not a 1 month adventure,
right?
1 month story. I mean, race kind of comes up here kind of on a regular basis. I mean, so as we deal with Black History Month, I mean, what's that like in Birmingham? Is it like, okay, big deal, not a big deal because we do it, talk about it so much? Or does that make sense?
Yeah,
It does.
And I think I mean, again, just kind of born and raised. I'm also the victim of probably not putting the emphasis on it the way I should. I think you have people from the outside who look at kind of the civil rights movement and this being kind of the epicenter and putting more of a focus on it. I hate to say it, I've kind of taken a little bit for granted, like right out our back door is where these things happen until it takes my dad to say, oh, I remember when it was Birmingham. We felt the shakes of the explosions at your grandmother's house where I was a kid and was kept away from the Children's Crusade because my grandfather was afraid, of what may happen. It takes that to kind of put me back in that place. But on a normal, I have to admit, I'm really not thinking that way, and that's unfortunate.
John Lewis, and we hope he does well through his cancer battle. I mean, but as he brings his colleagues down here on a regular basis to celebrate the March across Edmund Pettus Bridge, it's always enlightening when I talk to other people out of D.C. who come and have that experience. It's like, I didn't know that. I didn't know the significance. I didn't know the impact. Just so many things, and the closeness of this headquarters to 16th Street Baptist Church and all the things that happened here. It's always kind of an enlightening experience.
And Chris, I think that, one of Birmingham's greatest strengths is its history. One of Birmingham's greatest weaknesses is its history, right? And so I think Birmingham is in this interesting space in time where the dialogue has to continue, and it should be centered around, does Birmingham want to be historic or history, right? And I think there's a difference. Right?
Now, did you just come up with that?
Well, sometimes
you need to put JP in the PR department.
When you work in the division regions, you in the regions,
you make stuff up.
You do all that you can for the good. But it is a little bit Tuskegee. But seriously, though, I think that's where we are because although some things that happened during the 60s may not be taking place like they did, there's still a need for the conversation and the dialogue, not only regarding the past, the civil rights movement, but more importantly in 2020, human rights issues. When we're talking about not only race, but LGBTQ issues, gender issues. Last night, my Alabama Power, we hosted an LGBTQ fund reception for the Greater Community Foundation for Birmingham, and I spoke at that, and it really is about human rights. And in a state like Alabama, and most of our states in the Southeast, when you're talking about access to health care, education, those other things. So I think Birmingham is well positioned to take some of the learnings from civil rights and incorporate that and include those into some of these more human rights struggles. And I think just based on our history, we changed the world here in Birmingham. Just as the board mentioned, just right behind this very building.
And then you say, man, how does that impact the company? And how does that transition inside the company and the walls of the company as we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about belonging. You know, we have all this history right around us in terms of the strife and the division that race can cause, and how do we bring that inside and kind of work together and advance this company? I mean, how are we doing? I mean, you guys got any lunch table chatter about that?
Well, so I work in power delivery. I mean, I've been at the company 18 years, and you can tell we're making progress if you look at the leadership. You know, when I came here back in '02, there really weren't many leaders in power delivery that looked like me.
Right.
Today, I think you see a host of women and a host of minorities that have risen to that capacity. But we got much work to do. And I think representation is extremely important. And it takes really all of us working together to really achieve what we ultimately want. And that's to really look like the customers we serve. To be honest with you, we've got a pretty significant gap that still exists there.
Well, I think it starts with conversations like this. If we're not having these conversations openly and sharing them with the employee population and making them feel like it's a consideration or a concern for the leaders of our company, I don't think that we will get to where we want to go. So I think this is a great start. And some of the other projects with our CCI, Council on Culture and Inclusion, a lot of those initiatives, having those conversations, bringing this to the employees' attention in an open way, providing an outlet and an opportunity for them to contribute and provide feedback as it relates to inclusion issues. I think that's where we really move the needle.
How you feel? Have you guys feel like you've been getting feedback throughout your career?
Over the years, I feel that I have, but I don't think as a whole, as a company, we do a good job of giving real good feedback and what I like to call crucial conversations, right?
Crucial conversations.
And it's just like
That's
most of our...
Another phrase you need to capture.
I've got the book.
Most
it's upstairs.
Most of our
crucial
conversations. I mean, when we got feedback then, if you think about it, it was out of love, right? They wanted us to do better. So if they saw you doing something contrary, you got immediate feedback. And I think as leaders, we need to have those crucial conversations with employees because we do care about them. We want them to be successful. And when you care about somebody, you should be able to sit down and say, Kimberly, can I talk to you? Let's have some real conversations.
How do you feel when you get not positive feedback?
You know, so I've gotten the what the hell are you doing?
How did that feel? Were you thankful? Were you appreciative?
You know, it was tough to hear. But when you kind of process it and try to seek to understand, you find the value in it.
Agreed.
And I will tell you, there's really nothing more valuable in this business than guidance.
Right.
I think guidance is the key word for me that has helped me to get to where I am. Because certainly I couldn't have done it by myself.
It certainly stings at first. But to K-Rob's point, but when you reflect on it and really think about what you might have done or contributed, how you contributed to receiving that feedback, then I think you're able to take it in and say, you know, I really appreciate that person for telling me this, because now you don't have to take that over into your next opportunity or carry it forward in your career. You can address that then and hopefully become a better employee and leader.
We all have made mistakes.
Exactly. No one's perfect.
We all have made mistakes.
Agreed.
We're human.
Right.
Yes.
So I mean, as we kind of once again think about Black History Month, is that kind of a big part of the objective in terms of talking about the history and the heritage, but also saying those of us that have been given opportunities, there's a responsibility and obligation we have to create pathways for others coming behind us.
To whom much is given, much is required. And I think that is our obligation. If you have been given opportunities and actually opportunities to fail and fail forward, then I think it's incumbent. You're obligated to pass that along to the next generation or to your peers even. I think we don't sometimes even share with our peers some of the feedback that we've had or some of the obstacles that we faced, and we just expect them to get it like we got it in some situations. So I think it's we're obligated. It's incumbent on us to do that.
And Chris, to Kimberly's point, Dr. King once said, in the end, we won't remember the, words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I think that is incumbent upon us. When I look at Chris and he mentioned the names of African-American officers, at least at Alabama Power Company, that I know each and every one of them had some input into me being where I am today. And also each and every one of them gave me feedback that maybe I did not want to hear at that time. But at the end of the day, they could have been silent, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
And allowed me just to go down this path. But they were vocal and they had those conversations with me. So I think it is incumbent upon all of us to reach back and help someone else out, others out. And also, here's a crucial part too, and realize that there are some people that maybe we can't help, right? Because we can spend a lot of time with folks that sometimes people just don't get it. And we have to move on.
Let them go.
We have to move on.
Yes. Guys, so with that, we got to let this go too.
If I said yes.
Thank you very much. Guys, thank you. And have a good rest of the day.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Please join us in March when the Lunch Table returns to discuss Women's History Month and more.